listening to the Unleash Greatness podcast with your host, Jonathan Mitchell. The best in personal, emotional, spiritual, and business development.
Hey, what is going on, you guys? It is I, Jonathan Mitchell. This is Unleash Greatness. You guys are tuning in. Today is book review day, and I'm actually live on Instagram as I'm recording this podcast. If you ever have Instagram, go to find me at UnleashG on Instagram. You can watch me live if you ever see these podcasts. Today is book review day. So excited to go over Influence by Robert Cialdini. I hope I say his name right. One of my favorite books around influence and influencing others in psychology in a healthy way, which is great. This show is sponsored by naturalmedicineMamas.com. If you want to have some alternative or natural medicine, go to Natural Medicine Mamas. Anything with myself for the podcast around personal development or coaching, you can go to UnleashG.com. And I have a podcast that comes out every single day around personal development, and I hopefully inspire someone out there. So thank you again for listening in. Let's get going. Unleash Greatness. Thank you so much for tuning in. All right, you guys. So I love being able to do book reviews. It gives me a chance to review some of my favorite books out there. There's some incredible books with a lot of information, and I hope you all know I've had some guests on recently that said that they don't read books and they don't like books just because they think that sometimes people get too stuck on information and not enough on action. So please know when I read these books, it's to inspire you to action. It's not just to listen and think you're going to meditate in your room and think you're going to make bajillions of dollars and have super amounts of success. All books are, to me, are information that you can either choose to use in your life for the better or ignore. And so hopefully the books I'm able to give to you, or at least review for you, are inspiring, that help you want to first, want to read them, and then also hopefully push you to action to do something differently in your life. So today is book review day. I get to go over a book called Influence, Psychology of Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. Very, very good book. I hope I didn't mess up his name. But very, very good book. He goes over different strategies, the mindset, and how to have influence in a healthy way using psychology with people around you. So I'm going to go over a couple of things just around and read you a couple of excerpts from this book just because it has some really, really cool stuff. I'm going to go over a couple of things. One of the first things he says in chapter 1, the weapons of influence. I'm going to read you a quick little thing in here. It says, "There's a strong but sad parallel in the human jungle. We too have exploiters that mimic triggers to feature our own brand of automatic responding. Unlike most instinctive response sequences of non-humans, our automatic tapes are usually developed from psychological principles or stereotypes we have learned to accept. Although they vary in their force, some of these principles possess a tremendous ability to direct human action. We've been subjected to them at an early point in our lives, and they have already moved us about so pervasively since then that you and I rarely perceive their power in the eyes of others, though each principle is detectable and a ready weapon, a weapon of automatic influence." And so he goes into this book talking about different things that psychologically we've been trained to accept, or at least to do on a day-to-day basis, just because it's part of our culture, it's part of our world, it's part of being a human. So I'm going to go over a couple of things here real fast. One of the first concepts I want to read you about as far as a weapon of influence is contrast. So I'm going to read you one of these letters that gives the example of contrast, so you can understand what exactly he's talking about as far as contrast is concerned. So in order to give an example of what contrast is and how powerful it can be, he reads this kind of tongue-in-cheek letter from his daughter to her parents. It says, "Since I left for college, I've been remiss in writing, and I'm sorry for my thoughtlessness in not have written before. I'll bring you up to date now, but before we read on, please sit down. And if you're not sitting down, please do so before I continue. I'm getting along pretty well. The skull fracture and the concussion I got when I jumped out of the window of my dormitory when I caught on fire shortly after my arrival here is pretty well healed now. I spent a couple of weeks in the hospital, and now I can see almost normally and only get those sick headaches once a day. Fortunately, the fire in the dormitory, my jump, was witnessed by an attendant at the gas station near the dorm, and he was the one who called the fire department and the ambulance. He also visited me in the hospital since I had nowhere to live because of the burned out dormitory. He was kind enough to invite me to share his apartment with him. It's really a basement room, but it's kind of cute. He's a very fine boy, and we have fallen deeply in love and planning to get married. We haven't got an exact date yet, but it'll be before my pregnancy begins to show. Yes, Mother and Dad, I am pregnant. I know how much you are looking forward to being grandparents, and I know you'll welcome the baby and give it the same love and devotion and tender care you gave me as a child. The reason for my delay in our marriage is that my boyfriend has a minor infection which prevents us from passing a premarital blood test, and I carelessly caught it from him. Now that I've brought you up to date, I want to tell you there is no dormitory fire. I did not have a concussion or skull fracture. I was not in the hospital. I am not pregnant. I'm also not engaged. I'm not infected. There is no boyfriend. However, I am getting a D in American history and an F in chemistry, and I want you to see those marks in their proper perspective. Your loving daughter, Sharon. So this is all about contrast. What she does, if you can see this correctly as far as influence, is she's saying, here's all the things that could happen, like the worst case scenario, and here's what's actually happening. So for a daughter to try and get away from her parents being angry with her, this is a great way to go to saying, it could be worse, like a lot worse, but it's only my grades, so please don't be too upset with me. So very, very, very funny and kind of fun example about contrast. You needing to use contrast in your life is just pretty much saying that with anybody else around you, saying it could be worse because of this, you know. Next would be reciprocation. You want to be able to give, and please remember that these are based on trigger responses by people to help you influence them in ways of influencing them to a certain way or not. Reciprocation is all about knowing how to do something so people feel like they need to reciprocate something back to you. So as an example, be one like giving out free gifts as an example. So he gives a lot of examples of how to give gifts and that kind of thing. So one of his examples in here talks about a Krishna's community that wanted to do some fundraising. So they switched to a fundraising tactic. I'm going to read out of the book now. They switched to a fundraising tactic that made it unnecessary for target persons to have positive feelings towards fundraisers, because that's what they tried to do before. They tried to associate the fundraiser with positive feelings. So instead, what they did, they began to employ a donation request procedure that engaged the rule for reciprocation, which is strong enough to overcome the factor of dislike for the requester. The new strategy still involves the solicitation of contributions in public places with much pedestrian traffic. Airports are a favorite. But now, before a donation is requested, the target person is given a gift. So in this version, the most cost-effective version of it was a flower. The unsuspecting passerby who suddenly finds a flower pressed into his hand or pinned to his jacket under no circumstances allowed to give it back, even if he asserts he doesn't want it. No, it's our gift to you, says the solicitor, refusing to accept. Only after the Krishna member has thus brought the force of reciprocation rule to bear the situation, the target is asked to provide a contribution to the society. The benefactor before beggar strategy has been wildly successful for the Hare Krishna Society, producing large-scale economic gains and funding for ownership of temples, businesses, houses, and property in centers all over the United States. So a very cool example of this is just finding a way in your own business, in your own life, if you want to help reciprocate something from someone else, is to give. One of my past guests was, her name is Teresa de Gorobois, and one of the things she talks about a lot was to give 3 times before you ask for anything. So if you want to help someone, if you want to have someone's influence, give to them, and then you ask for something in return. So that's where the reciprocation comes in mind, is giving something to someone first and then asking for something back. There's another one, which is commitment and consistency. It's easier to resist at the beginning than at the end, is a quote he has here from Leonardo da Vinci. So if you're consistent in your requests, so another example would be as a proof from New York City. A psychologist named Thomas Moriarty staged thefts in New York City beach to see if onlookers would risk personal harm to halt the crime. In the study, research accomplice would put a beach blanket down 5 feet from the blanket of a randomly chosen individual, the experimental subject. After a couple of minutes on the blanket spent relaxing and listening to music from a portable radio, The accomplice would stand up, leave the blanket to stroll on the beach. A few minutes later, a second researcher, pretending to be a thief, would approach, grab the radio, and try to hurry away with it. As you might guess, under normal conditions, subjects were very reluctant to put themselves in harm's way to challenge the thief. Only 4 people out of 20 did so that the theft was staged. But when the same procedure was tried another 20 times with a slight twist, the results were drastically different. In these incidents, before taking his stroll, the accomplice would simply ask the subject, the experimental person, "Please watch my things," which each of them agreed to do so. Now propelled by the rule for consistency, 19 of the 20 subjects became virtual vigilantes, running after and stopping the thief, demanding an explanation, often restraining the thief physically or snatching the radio away. To understand why consistency is so powerful a motive, it is important to recognize that in most circumstances, consistency is valued and adaptive. Inconsistency is commonly thought to be an undesirable personality trait. The person whose beliefs, words, and deeds don't match to be seen as indecisive, confused, two-faced, or mentally ill. On the other side, a high degree of consistency is normally associated with personal intellectual strength. It's at the heart of logic, rationality, stability, and honesty. A quote attributed to British chemist Michael Faraday suggests the extent of which being consistent is approved, sometimes more than being right. When asked after a lecture if he meant to imply a hated academic rival is always wrong, Faraday glowered at the question and replied, "He's not that consistent." Certainly, good consistency is highly valued in our culture, as it should be. It provides us with reasonable and gainful orientation to the world. Most of the time, we'll be better off if we approach to things well-laced with consistency. Without it, our lives would be difficult, erratic, and disjointed. So again, an example in this is just thinking to yourself about consistency, even asking someone to do something for you, like watch my things. Like that alone was pretty powerful. And I find that same thing coming in sales and business with other stuff, which is very, very crazy. Next up from there is social proof. So if you want to influence someone, you want to have social proof showing that they're not the only one. I'm going to summarize this section because it says this in pretty much very long ways. People don't like being spotlighted in an uncomfortable position. They don't like being shown or possibly embarrassed because everyone's had an experience where they've been spotlighted or singled out or something like that. So social proof is a way to establish psychological safety so that people do not feel disillusioned by trying to do something by yourself. So as an example with sales, reviews, having positive reviews online is a way to have social proof showing that you are approved by the crowd. I'm going to kind of zip through these last couple. I'm so sorry. I wish we had more time, but that's social proof. Next is called liking, being able to be likable, and it's kind of, he uses the example of good cop, bad cop in this section, just saying that someone comes in, someone's a good cop, someone's a bad cop. The bad cop's performance is again kind of doing the contrast where you're saying one person is much worse and the other person's much better, and so the person usually negotiates with the person who is much better, or at least kinder or nicer, that kind of thing. So it's being likable and showing a contrast between yourself being likable and someone else who may not be. Next is authority. So people always respond more to authority. If you've ever been shopping and you have an issue and you're working with someone at the front of Walmart or something, that the first thing you say is, "Can I talk to your manager?" If you're able to set yourself up as the authority, though, you are where the buck ends. Buck stops. Is that what the phrase? This is where the buck stops. Yes, that's what it is. And your whole purpose is to set yourself up as an authority figure, whether it's at your work, whether it's with your knowledge base, whether it's whatever it is. You want to show yourself as the authority so you can have the influence of other people over that. Another one's called scarcity, the rule of the few. People use this all the time. You've had it before, and sometimes there's legitimate scarcity. Like, let's just say there's a car that you want to have, like a specialized Corvette or something, and they only make 20. That is scarcity being used at its finest hour. Does that mean Chevy couldn't make more? Of course they can make more, but they don't, to make it so the value of the 20 Corvettes is worth more. Or same thing with like sales with holidays, saying, okay, we're going to have this sale for a certain amount of time and that's it. There's a scarcity. It propels someone to action because of the scarcity involved. Same thing with what you want to do with your own life, whether it's with your personal life, with boundaries, with whatever, you want to use scarcity to your advantage. And honestly, setting a boundary or something saying, we're only going to have this offered for this amount of time. And lastly is one, he has another interesting part in here where he talks about how people in line, like let's just say someone's in line for a movie, and there's like a line of 50 people. One of the experimenters went up and said, hey, I need to cut in line because, and they made some weird, crazy reason like because my foot hurts and I got to go through because of the surgery coming up, something like that. And other people do, I have to get in line here because blah, blah, blah. And they make up some weird random reason. For some reason, we are triggered to say, hey, would you be okay if I got in line because something in our mind kind of turns off and we stop listening to what happens after because. If someone, the other experimenter, what they did is that they tried to get in line and said, hey, I need to get in line. Someone would just say, no, you can't get in line. You have to wait your own turn. Once they added the word because, I need to get in line because, are you okay with that? People would be like, oh yeah, that's fine. Whatever. I can handle that. Like, it's just this weird switch in people's psychology. So again, this book is called Psychology of Persuasion. It's Influence by Robert Cialdini. Very, very good book around influence, knowing psychology and what to do with it. So again, the topics are contrast, reciprocation, commitment and consistency, social proof, liking, authority, and then scarcity. So if you ever have a chance to read this book, it has some really, really cool stuff in it. Take a listen to it, whether you're in sales or marketing or whatever. It will definitely be beneficial to you. And super excited to have you guys on. Thank you again for listening. This is Unleash Greatness. Tune in tomorrow. We'll have more.